the policy making process for the United States government can be tricky, and there's a lot of different things to it, but it does connect with public opinion and what the people are thinking and what businesses are thinking, so that the legislators can determine what's important to their constituents. So we should explain how the U.S. culture, all the attitudes, beliefs that we've talked about, and people's political socialization influences the formation of these goals, the implementation of the policy over times, and the different ways to go about it. So it's a process here. Again, you have an agenda. You look at what is the public want, what is the public bringing to an attention. Then you formulate these things. Policymakers and the legislative and the bureaucracy, the executive branch, again, those iron triangles, take up different issues. They create laws, they regulate it, they find strategies to address the different problems, see if it's working. Then they adopt the policy. Makers formally adopt a policy solution because it's working. There's rules, laws, regulations. They implement it then. They put it into place. They make sure it's going smoothly. They kind of do some research to see how it's going. Then they evaluate. The evaluation could create revisions, and they go back to the formulation, or they go back and re-implement it in a different way. It's a constant process. So when they set the political agenda, basically deciding what they want to make all these policies about, they have to consider several things. Again, they have to consider the military, homeland security. Are taxes going to be affected? What type of energy are they going to use? Is it a welfare situation for citizens? Is it a civil rights issue? So these are the big political agenda pieces that the federal government deals with. And then again, who sets it? Again, they look at the constituents a little bit, but a lot of it is driven by big business, by the media, interest groups that are connected in those issue networks or iron triangles. And then the politicians deem what's important, and they set their agenda. So again, shared beliefs determine what is legitimate for the government to do, and there's some examples that would be like poverty. We want to get people out of poverty. It's an individual failure, yes, right? Or individual burden. But if so, then no government's needed. So is it their fault, or should government help? That's kind of the back and forth. But a shared belief is that we should get people out of poverty. So how do we do it? Who should be in charge? Wars can also play a role, right, and create burdens on the government and people. There could be depressions. Right now we have a pandemic. How does that play a role, and how does that affect the political agenda? So the scope of government action, government always gets larger. There's always different policies to put into place and more people working. Now, people generally believe that government should continue to do what it is doing now, so let's do status quo. Let's not really change things up. If it's working, let's stick with it. But change attitudes and events, so maybe like Katrina kind of changed how the national government should address a natural disaster. How should we address recessions and depressions? How should we address mandates nationwide? And again, it's hard to just attribute growth to one political party. So some of the rules of politics. Policies once adopted tend to persist. It is easier to start a program than to end one. Imagine ending Social Security. We'll talk about that. Imagine ending something that's helping people, getting rid of jobs, consolidating. So it's easier to start one than to stop. Almost all electoral politics are local. This is a big phrase. Politics are local. If you look at it, that's where the things get done. That's where it matters most. That's where you are most affected. Whatever the size of the staff, budget, government is always overlooked. More resources produces more work. That government never gets smaller, so it's always overlooked. So there's always proposals that confer widespread and immediate benefits, even if it's very, very expensive, right? A lot of times long-term costs aren't considered. Planning always takes place after a crisis, okay? So if there's a crisis, then we start planning for those things. It would be better off if it was the other way around. Mass media never covers what is going well, right? A lot of programs in our United States government that are going well, helping people out, that are efficient, but we're not going to cover those. We're going to cover what is going wrong and how can we fix it. Again, the separation of powers between the president and Congress sometimes. Again, split Congress and a president, that won't be very effective. There won't be a unified government. Uh, Different constituencies lead to pork barrel. Remember putting those little pieces for your constituents and how that affects those people, how it affects policy making. There's always different timetables, different demands for different areas of the country. Again, federalism, all politics are local, so giving money to the states, funding and mandates may come from Washington, must be implemented by the states. We have always had those unfunded mandates as well. The American system of policy making, then. Again, the power of judicial review, if we're making laws, rules, regulations, we have to make sure that we're not violating the Constitution. The judicial review will protect that. So other maybe branches are ignoring some decisions or standings, precedents, the judicial review comes into play. And then first and foremost, free speech now includes lobbying, lawmakers, it affects campaign donations and things like that. Limiting these is rarely upheld, so they have to consider that as well. Other influences. Groups may react to a sense of relative deprivation. So relative deprivation is the lack of resources to sustain the diet, lifestyle, activities, and amenities that an individual or group are accustomed to, or that are widely encouraged or approved in the society into which they belong. So if you connect that to government, lack of resources to sustain a certain activity of an amenity, right? Also, the media helps place issues on the political agenda. Rarely report what's going well, so they're going to say what's important. They push, and politicians probably have to address it. And the national government may later adopt ideas pioneered by the states, a bottom-up approach. So you have that federalism. States have the ability to implement different policies, and if it's working at a state level, maybe they will adopt it at the national level. Then we got to look at costs and benefits of these policies. So cost, any burden, monetary or non-monetary, that some people must or expect to bear from the policy. How much is it going to cost the people, the states, the government? Is it going to affect jobs? So what is the cost and the benefit? Any satisfaction, monetary or non-monetary, that some people must or expect to receive from the policy. Okay, so the burden, the cost, is it going to affect someone in a negative way? How much so? The benefit, how are they going to, how are they satisfied with this policy? Okay, and again, you're settling disputes. There's always more than two sides, but who's going to benefit, who's going to pay for it, and how many of those people are there? So we have different ways of classifying and explaining politics. The four ways are majoritarian politics, which is distributed benefits, distributed costs; interest group politics, concentrated benefits, concentrated costs; client politics, concentrated benefits, distributed costs; and in entrepreneurial politics, distributed benefits and concentrated costs. So looking at each of them. So majoritarian politics has a distributed cost and benefit. So usually there's a little opposition. For example, military and security. Everyone's paying for this. That's the distributed cost, and everyone's going to benefit from it. Everyone's going to be protected by the military. Okay, so distributed, everyone is kind of having to pay for it, but distributed benefit, everyone's going to benefit from that security. Majoritarian, so a lot of people all. Interest group politics, concentrated costs. A small group are paying for it, and concentrated benefits in a small group is benefiting. So a labor union would seek protection from government. Businesses opposed to preserve competitiveness in marketplaces. They're going to be competing, right? So they're going to pay into these campaigns or things like that. and a small group, a labor union, will pay into these concentrated benefits or concentrated costs and try to benefit from it because they want that protection. Client politics and concentrated benefit, so small group is going to benefit, but distributed costs, so everyone's going to pay for it. So iron triangles are great examples here, where a recipient must be seen as deserving or they lose legitimacy. So an agency capture is likely when benefits are focused and costs are dispersed. An agency is created to serve a group's needs. So for example, pork barrel legislation, everyone pays taxes, right? But only that small district is going to benefit from that new factory to put people to work. Um, in a natural disaster, we are all paying taxes and things like that, but the victims benefit, right? You got to clean up the area where the victims are, so only a small group are actually benefiting. And then in entrepreneurial politics, distributed benefits, so a lot of people are benefiting where only a certain amount of people are actually paying for it. Relies on entrepreneurs to get the public's attention, mobilize, get support. It could be like an environmental issue, consumer issue. So, for example, an environmental protections law would have, like the Clean Air Act, that is going to benefit everyone, but it's going to be paid for by an agency or done by an agency. So corporations also are paying for it. So it's implemented by the government. The corporations, the factories have to pay for it, but everyone's benefiting because there's cleaner air. Same goes for consumers and protection. Every business has to follow rules and regulations for their products, but everyone's going to benefit with safer products. So we have to ask, do we want something that's here and now or worry about the future? Policies are made sometimes on actual cost, not what it's going to cost in the future. Values also affect perception. So what is the right thing? What should the right thing be? And it could be different in different people's eyes. These perceptions also come in two camps, again, here and now, or we need to look at the future and quality of life.